guest is tax law expert Robert W. Wood, who is partner with Wood & Porter in San Francisco, writing in Forbes about short sale tax problems. Rob, welcome back.
Thanks, Scott.
Good article here, good timing. This is something that's going to be common for quite some time. Short sale, selling a property for less than you owe on it, and you get an agreement from the lender that, all right, we're going to go ahead and let you sell it, we're going to forgive the debt. And that forgiveness of the debt can, and often sometimes, can go as income to you, and then that can cause the big tax problem we're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to summarize this except to say that I guess probably of all of the sort of odd tax areas, one that I find, and of course there are many tax rules that are complex. These aren't terribly complex, but I think they're counterintuitive. I think most of us, when we don't have to pay back a debt, we don't think of it putting money in our pocket. But of course it does. I mean, if I owe you $200, Scott, and I don't have any money, and you say, "Oh, don't worry about it, don't pay me back," it's not as though suddenly I have $200. I don't. I mean, I don't have any money. But from an income tax perspective, I've just been enriched because I don't have to find that $200 to pay you back. So as you say, discharge of debt, cancellation of debt, people call it different things, but it is, generally speaking, taxable income. And so in these, regrettable short sales where people are, not getting any money out of it, the owner of the house not getting any money out of it, they're basically walking away, but they may be relieved of debt. The question is whether there's income. Of course, the general rule is yes, it's taxable, but as I outlined briefly in that article, there are exceptions, and there's a way out to a limited extent that, frankly, many people in this country have taken advantage of, and probably many more will as we continue to suffer through this recession.
And as tax law states, I think we're good until January 1, 2013. You can exclude up to $2 million of mortgage debt forgiveness on your principal residence, which has to be qualified principal, and it has to be residence debt. But if you're borrowing money, for example, to pay off credit cards on your second or third mortgage, then you can run into a problem if it's forgiven, right?
Yeah, and I think, this may sound like overkill, but I mean, you're right, Scott, to focus on the detail, and of course that's the way tax law is. You've got to meet the exceptions. So as you say, it's not any debt, it's not any, up to $2 million. You got to be careful, it's got to be qualified residence, and you have to meet the rules. I think for most people, it's worth a brief consult with your accountant or somebody, accountant or tax lawyer, but I think most accountants can handle these rules, and they're the ones typically who are going to be filing your tax return. There's a special form you file. Tip people off early. Don't just do it and then wait until almost a year from now at tax return time to bring it up and say, oh, by the way, I did this, and here's the documents. Check with somebody in advance. That's the way to prevent problems from occurring.
With the dire situation that people are finding themselves, well, in our part of the country, here in the West, are there other options for people who are in a particularly bad spot? Would doing this within the framework of a bankruptcy help to take care of some of that liability?
It certainly can, and I want to stress that I know very little about bankruptcy, and I'll give you my sort of 2 cents worth, having been a tax lawyer for 30 years. When clients say, well, gee, can't I discharge all the taxes I owe in bankruptcy? I've looked at this numerous times, and 99% of the time the answer is no, that they don't discharge their taxes. There are special IRS rules, but the IRS is quite good about getting around these, the way in which the bankruptcy discharge rules work. But Scott, you're talking about a different issue, which is what about a gain on real estate sales or something protected by bankruptcy? That's a different story because it isn't tax yet; it's simply gain. And the answer to that is yes. The one of the big exceptions to the cancellation of debt rule that I mentioned, the overarching rule that you have income when you don't have to pay back a debt, one of the big exceptions is bankruptcy. So if it occurs in bankruptcy and you might have $10 million of debt, even credit card debt, discharged, if you're in bankruptcy when that happens, it's not treated as income to you. So absolutely right, Scott. Bankruptcy is another big way out for a lot of people to these issues.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive too. In closing too, I think oftentimes, as I've read and seen in bankruptcy cases, if one is in less of a favorable position, if you short sale within bankruptcy, oftentimes, oddly enough, it's better to just walk away.
You're right. It is. There are a lot of strange things here, which once again is a good, I think, segue into the notion that you shouldn't, just jump and ask questions later. You should get some advice from a qualified bankruptcy lawyer, qualified accountant, qualified tax lawyer, as you implement these things, so that you can do it efficiently and so that you don't wake up a year later thinking, gosh, if only I'd, done this 3 days earlier or 3 days later, it would have been very different. That's something you don't want to do.
That's why we talked to you, Rob. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
He is Rob Wood, partner at Wood & Porter in San Francisco, known as the tax lawyer on Forbes. I'm Scott Drake, and you're watching the Legal Broadcast Network.